up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with some Detroit Lions news. We have a little bit of Lions news to cover today in today's video with the Lions coaching staff, but also we're going to do another draft profile. And today we're talking about a receiver that I'm going to call him a fan favorite. I don't know if he necessarily is. We'll see when we go through the draft profile if you haven't heard of him yet. But I know a lot of you guys have brought him up a ton when we went through mock drafts. So I decided today to do a video on him. So let's get it started.
The city's been down and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up. And then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here, and we're back with some more Detroit Lions news, but also a draft to profile. We tried this with the Christian Watson video, the receiver that we did from North Dakota State, and I thought it went pretty well. I thought it was fine. You know, it kind of smushed together pretty well, so that's what we're going to do again today. I mean, the two things don't relate at all, but we're kind of doing 2 in 1, because if I simply made a video just on this Lions news, it would be like a 1-minute video, and I just don't think it'd be worthy of even uploading that. Like, what's the point? Y'all clicked on that for that? Really? Hey, so I don't feel like it's worth it. So now I'm giving you a little 2-for-1 action, actually a little bit of 3-for-1, and I think this is going to be a good video just like that one. So let's dive right into this. Let's start with the Detroit Lions news, then we'll get into the draft profile side of things. We don't have a lot of Lions news, but it is that the Detroit Lions apparently have decided to part ways with inside linebackers coach Mark Delone. The Detroit Lions hired Mark Delone as their inside linebackers coach this past offseason, coming from the Chicago Bears. There has been no comments on this of why the Lions did it, or no comments from Mark Delone. Maybe we'll get some soon whenever we get to hear from Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes again, or maybe once they make a hiring, it'll be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's why they did that. It's kind of tough to say how well he did last season. I know it wasn't perfect for inside linebackers. There was also a lot of moving pieces the entire year, but it was also a lot of new pieces in that group. So it's hard to be like, well, based on, you know, what we saw the year before, how they performed this year, because it was a lot of new names between Alex Anzalone, Jalen Reese-Maybin really getting his first shot, you know, to start, basically. Jamie Collins was there at the beginning of the season, but we didn't see him for the full year. Then you had guys mixing in like your Josh Woods, and, you know, we saw even a little bit of Tavante Beckett. I think we saw a little bit of him. You know, you just had a lot of moving pieces. We got the guy from the Chiefs whose name is slipping me right now. Point is, you had a lot of moving pieces. Now, I think most of us believe the Lions will add new pieces to this offseason, whether that's through free agency or the draft or both. It kind of feels like a draft thing, but either way, I think a lot of us believe the Lions will add more pieces to that group to at least add some competition this offseason, but it looks like it's going to be without Mark Delone as our inside linebackers coach. Now, one thing that Mark Delone did lack when he was hired as the Lions inside linebackers coach on his resume, and he said this before, is that he's not one of those former players. I mean, a lot of the coaches we hired were former players. Mark Delone was not that. I'm not saying that's the reason he got fired because he was hired. If that's the reason he got fired, he probably would never been hired in the first place, but it is just something to point out. I know Chris Spielman did help him last season a little bit as well. Now, I'm not saying Chris Spielman's going to become our next inside linebackers coach. I won't count it out, but I'm not going to say that's going to happen. I don't think that will happen. But there has been a couple of names that have surfaced as possible in-house options that the Lions could hire for this role. Or, of course, they could do a thing like making a promotion for a guy like Kelvin Shepard, who is currently their outside linebackers coach, really his first year of coaching, and make him just a linebackers coach. I mean, that's a possibility as well, that he gets a promotion. A lot of guys were elevated, you know, at Senior Bowl, so maybe they just take a guy like Kelvin Shepard, like, hey, you're a retired linebackers coach. Maybe, maybe not. But some other names that I also saw brought up were, and again, if I pronounce these names wrong, I apologize. First off, we have Stephen Thomas, who was an inside linebackers coach and a special teams coordinator back at Princeton. And then also, and I know I'm going to mess this name up, okay? So, hey, I'm sorry. David Corrao? No, that's bad. Correo? David Correo. Oh, I think that's fire. David Correo. I'm going to rock with that. It sounds cool even if it is wrong. The linebackers coach for 5 seasons, plus he coached with the Miami Dolphins, which means he overlapped then with Dan Campbell when he was there. So that's also another option, another in-house option that the Lions could decide what to go with. There also is a guy like Brian Duker, who is currently our defensive assistant, but his background isn't like linebackers coach. It's being a defensive analyst and things like that. So don't necessarily think they'll go that direction. I don't think they'll go the Chris Spielman direction either, but it could just be simply as one of those guys, or maybe somebody else, but maybe one of those guys that the Lions look at in-house and say, you know what, we want to promote you to this spot, but of course, Mark DeLone can't be that spot too, right? And you're not going to really push Mark DeLone down. So, you know, we're going to part ways with Mark DeLone. We'll push this guy up into that role. It could be as simple as that. We'll see what the Lions decide to do. Let me know what you think they'll do. And if they do hire someone that's not those, or whoever they hire, we'll probably talk about it when it happens. But as of now, the Detroit Lions and Mark DeLone have parted ways. So appreciate Mark DeLone, wishing him the best going forward wherever that is. I'm sure he'll get another NFL coaching job somewhere in the National Football League. Now, I did want to throw in this quick little update on Aubrey Pleasant. We don't really have an update. So Aubrey Pleasant, we know he interviewed for the defensive coordinator position with the New Orleans Saints. Aaron Glenn interviewed for the head coach position, but, you know, he didn't end up getting that job. Instead, it went to their current DC. So it looks like Aaron Glenn's coming back, but we're still not completely out in the clear. Does that make sense? With Aubrey Pleasant, because he did an interview for that DC position with the New Orleans Saints. They have not announced who they're going to hire yet. Their defensive coordinator candidate very recently, the Chargers linebacker coach, but Aubrey Pleasant is probably still on their radar. Also, a little interesting note I took away is that they've also interviewed Lions' former receiver coach. Remember Prince, our receiver coach? He actually had to coach one game as their offensive coordinator spot. So we don't know who it's going to be. I don't want Aubrey Pleasant to go, but that's your little update there. Now let's get into this draft profile side of things. So today we're going to talk about a receiver that has been brought up many times when we've done mock drafts, and that is receiver Justyn Ross out of Clemson. This was one of the most interesting draft profiles I've done because there was a lot going on here with injuries, production, position, and he's a little bit different. I feel like he's got a little bit of a different style as receiver. So this was a very interesting draft profile to do. I'm pretty darn sure my mind is going to change on how I feel about this guy and where I would take him. What I say today is subject to change in terms of like where I think he'll be in the draft, but there's definitely a lot of things that I came to like today and some things that do for sure concern you, and I'm sure it concerns everybody else, and it will concern certain teams when it comes to the draft and making a decision if they want to take him. It kind of feels a little bit shaky when you hit those mid rounds. Like once you get outside like the top 8, there's a lot of question marks with a lot of players. So I don't know if it's just because this year I'm diving into receivers more. I felt like I dived into it a lot last year, but maybe I know more this year. I don't know. But I just feel a little bit less confident with some of these mid-round receivers this year. I don't feel great about the depth at that position. There's just a lot of question marks going on. His draft stock could probably range from, I don't know, end of first round, probably not end of first round, but maybe early round 2, all the way to like round 5. I mean, he's got a very wide range of probably where he could be selected in this year's draft, because early in his career with Clemson and then coming out of high school, it felt like he was going to be one of the top receivers when he decided to come out for the NFL draft. He got out to an extremely hot start with Clemson. He had 1,000 yards as a freshman on 46 receptions playing in 14 games and also 9 touchdowns. After that, it was like, oh man, this guy's going to be a top draft pick whenever he decides to come out for the NFL draft. Now, Justyn Ross is a 6'3", 205-pound receiver. I've seen that fluctuate a little bit. I've seen some people say 6'4". I've seen, up to about 215 pounds. So I've seen that number move around a little bit. He has been invited to the combine, which I'm pumped to see what his results are, especially with the 40 time and the speed drills, just to see what it comes out like, because I do have some definite questions when it comes to that. That moves you ahead to the 2019 season, his second year with Clemson, and his numbers in terms of yards dipped a little bit, but he had some very big plays in 2018. Like, he made some monster plays. He was averaging over 21 yards per reception. There were some huge plays which got everybody hyped. There was one against Alabama in the college football playoff where, I mean, he just caught a very short route and took it to the house after his cornerback fell down. There were some very monster plays. He followed it up in 2019, playing once again in 14 games, where he had 66 receptions, 20 more than the year before. His yards went down a little bit to 865, but he also again put up 8 touchdowns. So another very strong, solid stat line. But this is where things got kind of interesting, because then you start to talk about injuries. Make you very cautious, as I'm sure as a team that's drafting, but also as a fan. It make you very cautious about where you feel like your team should take a certain player, especially with the Lions. I mean, this was something that we did with the last regime. We drafted a few players that fell a little bit because of their injury status. It was like, oh, they should be higher than this, but they also had injuries, Julian Okwara, Austin Bryant. And sometimes it works, and it's like, hey, we just got to steal because he's balling and he's staying healthy enough. Sometimes it doesn't work, and he's just not able to play, and you really can't get to see the guy that you drafted. But also, it makes it tough to develop when you're not able to play and you're injured all the time. 2020, he missed the entire season. And it was further than just, yeah, he had an injury, he's coming back. I want to make sure I say this right. So it was a congenital fusion on his spine that they had to have surgically fixed. It was something that he was born with. So it was a stinger in his neck, not necessarily maybe an injury as much as something that he was born with that was discovered because he was dealing with this neck stinger. And that forced him to miss the entire 2020 season. And it started jeopardizing whether or not he was going to be able to come back and play football again. The good news is that he came back out of that. I know the teammates were hype. He got back from it. He comes back in 2021 and he was cleared by doctors to play and get back at it. So that's an awesome recovery. Just that alone deserves a little bit of a clap just to hear that. That's awesome news. You know, whatever happens, that is some fantastic news that he's able to get back to it, because in 2021, he was able to play in 10 games. All right, he played in 10 games. And the concern was, you know, can he take a hit? You know, it's very concerning when you go through something like that and you're talking about, man, is he ever going to play again? But he came back in 2021. He played in 10 games in 2021. You see the stat line. Now, this was a little bit different because this was with a different quarterback. DJ takes over this year. It was not great quarterback play before it was Trevor Lawrence, so it was a big difference. Also, another difference is he played a lot more slot receiver. They pushed him heavier into the inside. Now, the reason that Dabo Swinney gave us is because they had bigger outside receivers, not necessarily bigger than him, but they had outside guys, so they wanted to put Justyn Ross at the slot position, and they felt like he had the skill set that could translate to play that position. So they pushed him inside. He played a lot more slot than he did in the past. Now, he's played all over formations in the past anyway, but they pushed him more into the slot in 2021. You see his stat line, 46 receptions like 2018 season, only 514 yards. Some of that probably is because of the position that he's also playing at, and 3 touchdowns. So his numbers definitely took a dip, and plus coming off of that, it can concern some teams. But you also notice he didn't play in every game this season. He did miss a few games at the end of the season. He had foot surgery to end 2021. So there's been a couple of things in there that definitely you have to think about when it comes to the draft profile and things like that. But overall, it's just awesome that he was able to come back from that, play in 10 games like he did. One thing I definitely noted early, you could probably throw this into the other category, he's seemingly emotional player. You know, he leaves his emotions on his sleeve. You can see it in the way he plays, and you saw it a little bit last year. You saw times where he got a little frustrated. You know, I don't want to see my players complaining, but he did get a little frustrated at times. Not like he was, you know, doing crazy stuff on the sidelines, but you could see just some frustration with some of the passes that DJ was throwing to him and some of the balls that weren't very catchable. It was kind of off rather than when he was with Trevor Lawrence. Blocking, I want to start there real quick because the last guy blew me away with his blocking effort. Not necessarily the same here with Justyn Ross, but there is some upside for sure as a blocker, as he does have pretty good size and he delivers a pretty powerful punch as a receiver blocking. He was asked to block a lot, whether that was on a quick screen, sometimes he'd ask to get a cut block, whatever it may be. He was asked to block a lot, but this past year I thought he really improved as a blocker. We always knew there was that little powerful punch that he could deliver to move cornerbacks back. I mean, it's not a linebacker, but a guy that's similar to his size, maybe a little bit smaller. However, this past year as a blocker, I thought he was much better at staying locked onto players, staying more engaged as a blocker from play to play that he was asked to do so. I think in years prior, sometimes you'd see him get a little bit just kind of going through the motions, and sometimes they'd end up going his direction and he wasn't blocking anybody. That didn't seem to be as much of the case this year. He seemed much more locked into blocking, and you kind of see that powerful punch. So ability as a blocker, I think it's as good as you need it to be honest with you, and I thought his mentality got much better this year. That could always improve. You know, I want my guys to block at receiver, but I think he can bring that to the table. So that's something that sticks out, and I think it kind of ties in with just kind of seeing, the emotions that he plays with. Start with route running / release, then we'll get into pass catching and run after the catch. I think this is his best category. I think this is where he really thrives, is route running. I think he's honestly one of the better route runners. I shouldn't even say that. Let me not understate this. I think he's one of the best route runners in this class, especially considering his size. All right, actually, some of his speed could help him in this area because I'll say it right now, he's not very fast. Let me just get it on the table because I'm sure we're going to bring it up multiple times. He's not a very fast receiver. It's clear when you watch him. I'm not going to say, I really don't know how to put it. He's just not very fast. I wouldn't say he's slow, but he's definitely, at best, average. It seems a little bit below average. I'm super pumped to see where he runs his 40 at the combine because he did seem a little bit slower this past year, but I also think some of that had to do with the role that he was playing in the slot. A lot of times you're finding holes in zones, so you're sitting down, you're playing a little bit more slow, you're trying to get the timing correct. However, he did look a little bit slower, but even early in his career, he was never that fast. He's not going to beat anybody really with speed on the outside, so there is that to throw out there, especially when we talk about route running. He can last lack some separation at the top of routes because he's just not that fast. And he also does lack some acceleration as well. Again, he will show some effort here. We'll talk about it, but he also lacks some acceleration. So I just want to get that out there right away because I'm sure we're going to bring it up throughout this entire thing for every category. So I want to get it out there. Sure, I'm going to be giving out a lot of praise in the route running section. And as we hit on, there are a couple of limitations here, but there is so much to like with him as a route runner. I've honestly compared other receivers in this year's draft to him in terms of route running, just to see what he's able to do that they don't do well, to constantly get separation, specifically in short, yardage, immediate areas, consistently get separation in short areas, intermediate areas, and sometimes over the top as well. It's very impressive for a guy that's not extremely fast and doesn't have incredible acceleration. So let's talk about all the things that I really like here. First off, he does an incredible job of selling where he's not going. And we hit on this with Christian Watson as well. But especially like man coverage, when cornerbacks are looking at you, you really have to sell this with your shoulders, your hips, your eyes. You really have to sell this. And he does this at an extremely high level, but he also mixes in some little nuances as well to really sell fakes. And you'll see some of this very early in his routes off the release as well. But you'll see some, dead legs, some false steps, some, just a lot of little movements, a little pieces to just get a cornerback leaning one way. He has a whole package here to constantly sell fakes and where he's not going. He does this at an extremely high level. But then he pairs this with an incredible ability to change directions while not giving really any tell to it, not standing up tall, not slowing down, but changing directions basically in phase of his route. That's how I wrote it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I wrote it. The ability to change direction just on a dime. Excellent hips, sinking hips, driving down low. You're going to see his legs, they stick in when he cuts in and out of breaks. They don't shoot out. He keeps incredible balance, and he's able to make cuts over and over. He can do 2 cuts in the same route. Bam, bam, hit you twice with it. Sell this route, then snap down his chin to his knees, and then he's able to stay low, feet stay underneath, make a play. It's incredible for a guy that's 6'3 plus, for a guy at his size to be able to do that. This technique is really clean. Maybe that's because of the amount of years he's been there, because I'm gonna be honest, watching his early years through Clemson, there were some question marks about, sometimes he would round off some routes, sometimes he wasn't always completely engaged, but dang, 2021 was not the same story in my eyes. Even when the ball didn't go to him, you're watching his route running. It's nice about Justyn Ross, he does the little things really well. Off of that release, that cut, you'll see him do the little things like flattening out his route. So if you get him on a corner route, you'll see him flatten it based on how the cornerback is playing. If he's giving some cushion, he'll flatten that route out to make it an easier target for the quarterback. So much to like as a route runner here. So you're going to see him in the slot working against an outside leverage defender. He's going to go to this skip release, which he likes to do against off coverage. He's going to work into a corner route. Notice how he flattens this out into the blind spot of the defender. But then also here, notice out of this break how he pumps his arms. It's all about that separation, close that gap, and then of course, high point and immediate tuck it in. It's something that I noticed very early with Josh Reynolds, that he was doing that when he was playing for us as soon as he came in, and it made him a big target for Jared Goff on some of our corner routes. We'd have the corner flat on each side, and he would flatten those things when the cornerback was giving him some space. That's what he does as well to try to stay away from defenders. Not super fast in terms of acceleration, go to 0 to 100, but he can go from 100 to 0 very quickly. Doesn't have incredible acceleration, doesn't scare you with his top end speed as a route runner. Or out of cuts, he consistently got low and pumped his arms to try to get that space and that separation. That's what it really comes down to. The cuts and breaks are cool, but if you're not going to accelerate and get that space, really doesn't matter. But you also have to understand the feel, and he understands the zone feel. However, against man coverage, you have to accelerate out of those breaks, getting low, accelerating, and continuing to pump his arms out of those cuts. There is so much to like with him as being a complete route runner. I gotta believe that this guy can pretty much run the entire route tree that you have. I really don't think there'd be limitations like, yeah, he can't run that route very well. It's high level route running. And then it also is playing off of the guy that's defending him. He understands leverage really well. He sets up defenders like we hit on, with some of the fakes that he does, understands the leverage side of it, and then getting reps at slot, I think really helped him understand zone and where the hole is in the zone to try to make himself a target. You'll see him kind of start to slow down, but I've even seen this playing the outside receiver. You'll see him slow down and try to make himself a target for the quarterback. Plus, I'll throw in the fact that he can do an excellent job. He can do an excellent job of working his way back to the football when the play breaks down, making himself a huge target for the quarterback. Has a pretty big radius because of his size, but I'm talking about getting himself in front of the quarterback and putting his arms out like, hey, or throw it here. Just not a very well route runner. I mean, he is very crisp as a route runner. There are probably just some limitations here, but for a guy that can attack short intermediate routes, if he was on the Lions, we saw it last year, right? You know, if you're kind of running that system where you're going to have some of those shorter routes, quick hitters, you know, one cut, get open, that kind of thing, he's constantly getting separation, and most of the time you can rely upon the fact that he's going to be open. Now, one thing you have to do is get timing down. He's going to usually get open, especially in man coverage. You just have to get the timing down with him, because it seemed like at times the timing wasn't great between him and the quarterback, and there was some misfires there where they were in two different places. That transitions you to the most important stage, right? Catching the football. If you can't catch the ball, it's hard to draft you. It really is if you can't catch the football. It probably won't happen. Taking a look at his pass catching. Overall, pretty darn good pass catcher. He has an extremely low drop rate. I think they said he's had 14 drops. I think that's what they listed it as throughout his college career, which would be those 3 seasons. Last year, I know his drop rate was extremely low. It was like 2.1%. He doesn't drop a ton of passes. And what do I mean by drops? Not necessarily a pass breakup, but just simply dropping the ball. I mean, everybody seems to have their concentration drops here and there. It just happens. But he's a pretty reliable target, especially, again, those short and intermediate areas. And just like Watson, he plucks the football. I rarely see this guy catch the ball with his body. He goes up and he gets it. He's plucking passes. Even if that's short, if it's just a quick little hitch, he'll come out and he'll snag the football. To have a receiver like that, you know, that you can pretty much rely on that he's going to catch the football when I throw it his direction, especially if you're going to play kind of that style where it's like, okay, 5 yards, 7 yards, bam, bam. You have to catch those balls, because if you're dropping passes, then it's hard to continue to keep a drive alive when you're working on short routes. Another thing that I really like about him as a pass catcher is, I saw someone name it field awareness. I think this is a really good way to put it, but it's just understanding where he's at on the field, constantly understanding, I got to get my feet in bounds. Usually he's getting 2 feet in bounds, but he understands where the sideline is, and he can do this with his back to the sideline. Like, you'll see him catch passes in a variety of ways. He's pretty flexible, where he can catch it in a multitude of ways. As long as it's put in his radius, he can kind of adjust his body to that position to give himself a chance to catch it. But then understanding where his feet are, where the first down marker is, running to the first down line. It was a 3rd and 3. Get to the first down, please. Those little things are very important. It's field awareness that he does at a pretty high level. Understanding where the sideline is, got to get my 2 feet in bounds. Those little things are extremely important, but that makes you, to me, NFL ready. I do have some question marks about his pass catching, though. And one thing, I listed it honestly as effort. There was some at times, I'm going to put this as a knock at 2021, where I feel like I saw some questionable effort. And like I said, he plays with a lot of emotion, and there were times that he was clearly frustrated, but you can't let that get to you on the field. You know, you can't play frustrated. You have to be locked in. Even if things aren't going your way, you have to stay locked in. And it felt like there was a few times where he made very questionable efforts on passes that weren't very good. Now, look, the pass maybe not catchable, but it's kind of a questionable effort sometimes, even after the catch is made, to go get the guy that picked it off, things like that. Sometimes there was questionable effort in some very, tough situations for the receiver to come up with the football, to just go and at least try to knock it down. That's something that really concerned me, especially 2021, because I saw it like 3 or 4 times where it was just kind of like, oh, that's a terrible pass. What are we doing here? It's like, at least knock the ball down. You need to play through that. Understand, it's not in the right spot. Go knock it down at least. You can't let these things be picked off. You can't not make an effort. You got to at least put your arms out. Like, that thing come up a few times. It's not a red flag, but it did come up a few times, and it's concerning. I did see a few inconsistencies in contest situations. I mean, these are never going to be guaranteed. He does have some incredible plucks on his tape when you watch one-handed or two-handed. He has some incredible grabs on his film throughout the years that he's been at Clemson in contested situations. But I thought last year he was a little bit less efficient in contested situations than he was in the past. Maybe it's just because I watched more 2021 games, but he just felt a little bit less efficient in some of those contested situations, coming up with the ball, playing through contact, coming up with the football. He's got a pretty big radius overall, but then he does a nice job of tracking the football while it's in the air to put himself in a position to make a play. And that with the fact that, man, the guy's body control is incredible. Like, he can just catch it in the super weird, goofy angles, but still get his feet in bounds. Sometimes it doesn't even look healthy, but it still happens. Healthy? I don't know. He still makes that happen. So it's just that ability to catch in different ways. One knock I do have here is he does seem to kind of have a tendency to like short arm passes. Usually think of a quarterback like short arming throwing it, but sometimes it's like he doesn't put his hands out too far enough. I don't know if he's got like short arms or what, but sometimes it's just like his hands don't go out far enough. It'll just fingertip passes that you would think that he would catch. But one more thing to show a little bit more love here. When it does come to these deep routes, over top, if he's even, if he's got a little bit of a step, whatever the reason may be, he does do a really good job of catching passes over the shoulder. I counted multiple big plays that came over the shoulder, which is not an easy pass to catch, okay? I challenge you. If you have someone to throw you a football, I mean, some of you might be receivers, you probably know better than I do, but if you have someone, have them throw you an over-the-shoulder pass, all right? Stand, like we did this. Stand this way. Someone stand behind you. Have them throw you an over-shoulder pass and try to scoop that. It's tough. It's not easy. At least for me, it wasn't easy to do it. The point is, he's really good at catching passes over the shoulder. Also, I'm curious to see what his vertical is. Sometimes his timing wasn't always perfect on jump balls either. With his pass catching and route running, it's going to be something that, we'll have to see what the Lions do with it. If they want a guy that's a little bit more dangerous, I think, over the top, they may go with someone with a little more speed because he's just going to lack that. And he's got the size and ability to do it. There just wasn't that great top end speed. And I know one last thing. I know this ties into route running, but it's little things like this, and this is in his final year, so it's probably more understanding, but making yourself a target for a quarterback. Here he sees a cornerback blitz, so he immediately gets his eyes on the quarterback, makes himself an easy target for this check down pass. You're going to see the clip here, and I love it. Just that recognition, sit down, make the grab. That ties you into run after the catch. I love the category. I love to talk about it. And this is a weird one because I've seen some people say he's outstanding after the ball's in his hands. And there's others that are like, yeah, he's really not good at after the ball's in his hands. To me, I kind of feel a little bit in the middle here. I see a potential, I see ability, but I don't see a dangerous player with the ball in his hands. I'll say that. They did get him involved. You saw some jet sweeps occasionally thrown in there, things like that. But he didn't seem very scary with the ball in his hands. He had some screens. Look, he's got ability to pick up extra yards, no question. I mean, like I said, the guy averaged 21 yards per reception in his freshman season. I necessarily point this to is I think he lost it. Maybe it was a little bit more of the role he was playing in the room that they were giving him. But on screens, I think it really sticks out is he's got potential here because he's kind of elusive, like more elusive than I expected. Just he's got a little bit of shake to him. And I think he uses his ability to set up defenders when the ball's in his hands. He sells things really well. He kind of sets up defenders. He's not small, so he's not going to be easy to tackle. There's a couple times where I saw him fight for a few extra yards, and he's picking up a couple extra because he's not easy to bring down for certain cornerbacks. But I wouldn't say he was scary once the ball's in his hands. First off, there was no like top-end speed scare here. He didn't have incredible explosiveness, so there was a few times on the screens where it was almost like he was a little bit stuck in the mud, where he didn't get to get going before a guy got his hands on him. Romeo Doubs was incredible with this because as soon as he got it, he was just bam, 0 to 100. Was not the case. And I think a lot of things translated from his route running to what he can do after the catch. So I'm going to say he's not scary once the ball's in his hands, but don't leave it past him to get a few yards after the ball's in his hands consistently, especially in space. It's just not someone that's scary. I think Watson was much more scary when the ball was in his hands. It was like, shoot, he could take this home. Some of that is competition level as well. That didn't seem to be the case here, though. But I know he has some abilities to pick up a couple of extra yards from where he originally catches the football. This will be an interesting player to project, I mean, for sure, because there's things that the Lions may love here. Size, position versatility, route running is at an extremely high level, and I think there's a lot of guys in this draft, especially at his size, that don't run routes like he does at all. Also, he's a pretty reliable pass catcher, him coming back from his injury, but also at the same time, some teams may be concerned with him having that surgery in 2020, and then, of course, the toe. We'll see how he looks at the combine, but we haven't seen him since then. We'll see how he comes back from that. So injuries will be huge, and that could have him drop on its own because teams may be a little bit concerned with taking that. Yeah, you played 10 games, but who knows? You're just concerned for a long-term sake, even though he has been cleared and it's, been fixed. Come back like he did was awesome. So wouldn't say I have any red flags with him. He's an interesting prospect for sure. It's tough because I have a lot of question marks with pretty much everybody in the mid rounds, round 2, round 3. I have question marks with everybody in those spots. And I feel like this player does some things like route running at such a high level. He separates himself and he's a reliable pass catcher. Those two things together, that can make you dangerous at the next level for sure. I think combine's going to be extremely huge for him. I can't say as of now, maybe this will change, and I could see him as one of our top 3 picks. Where they are now, right? Early second round. I can't see him going, the Lions taking a shot on him that early. I don't know how I'm going to title this video, but I feel like he does kind of feel like a fan favorite around here. And I think, when you watch him play in those big games and things like that, it's exciting. It really is. And he's made some big plays in those games, like the LSU championship. I think he led his team in receptions and yards. That may not be correct, though. I think it is just off the top of my head. The point is, I'm going to give you guys a bold prediction, all right? really bold here. I'm going to predict this guy goes round 2. I'm just saying it right now. Not to the Lions necessarily. I'm going to predict he goes round 2. I'm looking at this draft. If receivers start flying through round 1, I could see him going to the end, about the end of round 2. I can see that happening. That's going to be my bold prediction. That's subject to change. If someone's willing to get over some of that concern and they don't need the fastest guy, you got to understand that this dude is a really good player, and I'm definitely much more impressed with him after now diving into. So shout out to you guys for continuously bringing up. Shout out to people in the chat. I know I can't remember who it was. It was like, I like Justyn Ross. So shout out to you guys. This is your Ross video. Bold prediction, he goes round 2. But once he gets to round 3, with how the Lions picks are currently are, pick 67, things may get interesting depending on who they have at that spot, who's available, and if they drafted anybody or signed anybody in free agency. Things could get very interesting there. I'm putting him above some of the, the Romeo Doubs, things like that, because extremely fast and stuff that they are, the pass catching is not reliable. He's going to push himself above a lot of players. Let me know in the comments where you have him ranked. We'll see where he ends up. It just depends on who the team is. Not going to bring great speed, but he does bring some other things because he has to, and he brings them at a high level. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.